Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke, and it is now the 24th of August, and we are, one more week left to the month. I feel like I'm doing some kind of a weird countdown here, but that is the situation at the moment. It is Saturday, so I know usually during the week there's a lot of people who sign in at this time, and it might be hit or miss for some other people. So I'm going to, this morning is actually one where if I don't end up having a lot of people on, I will probably try to do a reading and hurry up and finish by 7:30ish. If it runs to normal time, that's okay. But it's mainly because I have to do this class, which means I've got to get showered, I've got to get dressed. I have my car partially packed for this already, but I have to go over to Milford and teach Reiki 2. I don't think it's going to be an all-day class because I have 2 out of the 3 students that I had before who want to do Reiki 2 this time. And so usually when there's an even number of people, it goes very, very fast. Last time we had to wait. Karena came and kind of stood in as our extra person. And the extra person can't be me because I need to be making sure everybody's doing the right thing. So good morning. So today's a busy day for me. And I'm doing I'm doing that class today. And tomorrow I'm doing the intuitive development class from 4 to 6. I'm actually already booked back-to-back appointments from noon onward before that. So it's going to be a very busy Sunday for me too. So I've been trying to kind of shove in as many things as I can. I have not been uploading these live streams to YouTube. I'm realizing I was really trying to keep up with it. And now I'm realizing that the last one I had uploaded was August 18th. So I thought, and I had pulled down the 20th through the 24th. So 24th is uploading now. Everything is up there. And of course, if you watch these, then you've seen them here. But a curious thing happened with the one for the 19th. That was the day that I had that, experience that a lot of people tuned in to find out what was going to happen. And weirdly, there were a lot of people who watched that one or watched that one in replay. Karena being one example, she actually took a screenshot. She said it was like you went and then all of a sudden you blacked out. Like it wouldn't show the rest of it, which was weird. Now, I have not gone back and tried to review that video myself. I haven't had time. But I am going to probably go look at it. The fact that was one video that, for whatever reason, was not... I thought that I had already uploaded it, and apparently I had not. But now I've kind of gotten the message of don't upload that one. Not because there's anything wrong with it or that anything wrong was said in it, but for whatever reason, it was like, okay, it was said to the people who were there at the time, and as much of it ends up being shown is what's going to be shown, but don't put it on YouTube. So I was like, okay, so the 19th is not going to be on YouTube. So if anybody wants to see it or attempt to see it, they'd have to look at it here. But yeah, that was the one after I had my rather intense... And they did tell me to talk about it, so it wasn't like, you said something you shouldn't have said or whatever. And speaking of things that maybe you said that maybe you shouldn't have said, I was talking about messages I had for somebody over the last couple days from Azrael. It was aimed at a particular individual who I did not name and whom I'm still not going to name. But that person did a video yesterday covering, it's a music channel, and actually covered somebody who was incredibly, incredibly controversial politically, doing singing. And I remember I had mentioned this particular song to this person. I felt like it was months ago. I feel like it was a long time ago. Maybe it wasn't months ago. I mean, time seems to be one of those things that I'm not really keeping up with. But the response from his own audience was so negative to him doing this song, because I'm on the Patreon and I'm seeing the feed, and I kind of said, oh, I hope I didn't put him up in through this, because I mentioned it to him, but then he had said, oh, that might be a good one to cover. I said, no, it's not a good one to cover. Like, literally, don't open that can of worms. Like, don't cover this one. And then he wrote back like, oh, okay, But then I noticed today that he had done it. And people were just like, oh, almost like who would have dared to request this song? And I had mentioned it, and people were like, oh, so we're going to blame you for it now. I mean, they were kind of laughing when they said it. But he messaged me and said, no, it was somebody on either Facebook or Instagram who requested it. It wasn't you and what you said. I said, okay, good. Then it's not me. But I did find the what I thought was interesting is, I mean, you expect when you post something that's politically divisive unintentionally, and literally the tagline on it is like, "This is not about politics, I swear," and nothing this guy does ever is. But it was, to me, I was surprised at the backlash he got from within his own community for doing it. And the fact, and what I guess I didn't like about the conversation that was happening on Patreon, and again, it is Mercury retrograde still until Monday, so I'm kind of saying to myself, okay, maybe you're reading too much into this, and maybe you just need to not. So, you know, keeping my responses tempered. But I almost felt like it was this idea of, oh, you should never suggest it to this person because almost like they're too dumb to do it themselves. You know what I mean? So like they're too dumb to figure out that they shouldn't do this. And I mean, maybe not even too dumb, maybe too naive. And I thought, I don't know. I just find that, a bit offensive. So yeah. So anyway, yeah, that was just kind of a weird thing, but I'm also realizing that, you know, I think people are just concerned that this person's opened a can of worms and already gets enough comments that they don't deserve on certain things. So it's more of a protective instinct on this person, but I was just like, you know, I'm like, they're a grown ass person who can figure their own stuff. You know, that if they want to go out there, and like I said, that person is all Aries. So if they want to go out and do something, they'll do it. And but I just didn't like, it was almost like a scolding, like, oh, you know, don't say that to him. You know, it's a mistake to say things because if he wants to do it, he'll just do it. And I'm like, yeah, and so, you know, like, I mean, part of me was just like, oh, I didn't want to be like, say, like as though he had decided to do it because I'd said it. So anyway, I don't need to go on this continually. So okay. So with that all said, the topic that I was actually going to talk about today, I had a very strange dream last night. And it was a dream about, it was like these different islands. And it was like a place where people went on holiday and so forth. You know, it wasn't a, you know, so it was almost like it's like a resort area of islands, but not necessarily like the Caribbean or anything like that. It was just this area. And there was this one island that was very, like, natural. Like, there wasn't buildings and stuff on, like, or if there was just, it wasn't so much touched by humans. It was more forest or more greenery or whatever. I don't quite have the full visuals in my head. And there was like a lagoon there that was kind of muddy. Like there was or, you know, where one would land, like a boat, was kind of this semicircular kind of thing, and it was like muddy. But it was like I had seen that people had gone to this island before and were attacked by something that lives like around the water. And what I was seeing is people were kind of you know, like literally like a whole family like torn apart and decimated by going on this island. And I could see that whatever this was in the water, and I could see the eyes kind of sticking up from above the water. It kind of had this Creature of the Black Lagoon kind of feel, but it was female, and it was all brown in color and very, very tall when it did actually stand up. And it was interesting because it was almost like it was just kind of hanging out, like almost like a chameleon, like it blended in. But I could see that this was over here, and it did disturb me that people were still coming around and doing stuff, because that just seemed like it was really a dangerous thing to do. But in any case, just not to go through the whole dream, but there was another point in the dream where it was like they were having some kind of a festival or celebration or something, or party, I don't know what it was, but that they had actually built a whole structure on this island, like all the trees and stuff went up. There was like this, or most of it, they had put this big structure, and good morning, and then they had put like pavers out in the front, like, so they had kind of filled in and kind of sanitized it. It was all white and gray and sanitized. So yeah, so there was all of this kind of sanitization, but at one point I remember though, beforehand, there was like a boy there, or a teenage boy who was like, had a basketball and that kind of thing, and was playing basketball, was like throwing, like wadding up paper and throwing it in, to like a net. And, when he did that, it was like, you know, and so so, oh, hi. Good morning, Pat. Oh, it's good to see you. I'm so glad that you're joining. Yeah, it's, glad to see that you could finally make it in this morning. I know that you have to get up early for things, so. And it is a bit early. We're in the same time zone, but it's a bit early. Anyway, I was just talking about this dream I was having last night, and it was about this, like I said, this kind of creature that's in this water. And so they build this whole, like in this natural island where there's this dirty, muddy water, they kind of build this whole thing, and it's all sanitized. And it's actually, I can see people going around cleaning up, like mopping. There's like PPE, there's, disinfectant wipes, all the stuff that we would, had during COVID, where everybody had like a million of those kinds of things. Good morning, Suda. And I'm talking this morning about the, this recapping for people who are coming in, that this is, good morning, that this is my, this is a dream I had last night. And, okay, just real quick recap. This is island, it's, very natural. There's like this muddy water, semicircular kind of lagoon type place, like, where one would land a boat. And, there's this creature in the water who's very, who apparently has torn people apart on this island before. I mean, that was an image that was in my mind. And very tall, brown, looked like Creature of the Black Lagoon kind of thing, but female. And in the water, and you could see like the eyes looking up from the water, but blended in otherwise with the surroundings. So I was mentioning that they decided to build this building, and before that, I remember I had this image on the island of this boy like making a makeshift basketball thing and wadding up paper and just like being bored, like just playing basketball with himself. And so they had all this PPE and everything, and they'd clean, sanitize, build this big, shiny new building, and like I said, the gray pavers and everything. And then it was like this, at night when everybody left, this creature kind of came out of the water and found the basketball net and took all the PPE, ripped it apart, wadded it up, and was playing basketball with it. Which was, I was like, oh, that's a really interesting dream. That's a really telling kind of a dream. And so what it got me thinking about, because first of all, I think of that kind of a figure as almost a dark feminine figure, in the sense that it's something that could be, that people are afraid of, that could be destructive, like, physically destructive, right? Because, the dark feminine is more I guess more what you could think of as destructive. But again, destructive does not have to mean evil, and that's actually what was kind of in my mind as well. It was almost like these people had come in and were doing something in a space, it's kind of like the way in which nature can be very savage in some ways, okay? And I just sent a request, don't know if it's normal, I just see a static image. Oh, okay, the request, the reason I don't respond to those is because that will actually physically bring you into the video. And sometimes people will do that, like they think, oh, let me request to be in it, but then you're going to be in it, so that's why I don't do those. So yeah, so anyway, that's why. So hopefully you can just see me normally. I mean, you might, if you're having trouble seeing me, you might just want to just go out and just click on live and just go back in normally, or go on my Instagram page and just hit it, and you should be able to open it, because yeah, then you might be able to see it, not static. So yeah, sorry about that. I do get people occasionally who will do that, but I don't usually respond to those because I don't think you want to actually be brought live to the video. So, okay, so any case, so yeah, or you might want to cancel your request to be in the live video. I don't quite know how that works. So okay, so you have this, so you have all this thing that's happening, but the other thing that this made me think about, you have this kind of muddy water, you have this monstrous feminine creature that almost represents, and the fact that she's like destroying like this PPE and stuff in this video, like anything that we use to sanitize, makes me think about concepts of purity, and in particular concepts of of pollution and purity. Okay. Now, generally speaking, when we're talking about something that's sacred, you don't, you want this idea of pollution. And, pollution is, when we think about religious ritual in particular, or we think about entering the realm of the sacred versus the realm of what they call the profane. Profane, we often talk about profanity, that's how we talk about swear words and things like that. Profanity actually just has to do with that which is ordinary. It's profane, it's mundane, it's profane. It's just something that is not It's not necessarily what we would treat as sacred in nature. It's something we treat as very ordinary. Or sometimes even profane in the sense of maybe not, again, not not clean, not cleanly in some way. What we think of as profane might be something we think of as unclean to some degree. Because what is sacred is something that we feel that we are not in our state worthy to approach. And that can happen in cultures for a couple of different reasons. In some cultures that are more shamanic in nature, when you're talking about the shaman, or you're talking about somebody like that, you're talking about a space where that is between this world and another world. Okay, it's almost like a multi-dimensional space, almost like a portal between two realities. And that is considered to be a dangerous place because that is a place where you may be stripped of your identity, where you may be transformed. It's also a potential place of death for certain people. So it's generally considered to be a taboo space. The only people who are in that space are people who are undergoing very, very specific kind of rituals. And the shaman, as somebody who goes back and forth between those spaces, is kind of a taboo figure because that person is like, it's like they're not one thing or another. They're kind of in two spaces. They're very liminal in the space that they're in. They're kind of between two realities. So therefore, it's kind of like they're human, but they're not quite human, almost in the way that their role is interpreted. So they're almost approached as though they were some kind of there's some kind of intermediary kind of being. So while the shaman would be respected in the community for sure, and people would visit the shaman for certain things, the shaman might also be somebody who lives like in the forest by themselves. Now the other idea about pollution tends to come from Western thinking about sin. Okay. Now, just thinking of Hinduism as well, just thinking about the kind of purifications one goes through. There's a whole lot around caste and which castes are eligible to do certain kinds of rituals. For example, then there's, you have the idea of untouchables, an untouchable caste in India. And a lot of this is supposed to be based on rules of dharma and so forth that are, that again, the social implication of that is not, generally is not something, we can't, a lot of us, it certainly was critiqued in the West, because the idea that you would have a group of people who are, if someone is judged to be karmically, unclean or whatever, I don't know. There's a lot about human rights and ethics that kind of go around that kind of a thing. Nonetheless, the reality is that that's just been a thing that's been part of the system, something certainly that's been critiqued. But you have this ideas about purity and purification, in doing puja, when doing certain kinds of rituals, the way in which one bathes before doing certain things or whatever. So we have this idea of purity. In the West, it's more the idea of being sinful and whether or not you are in a clean enough state to approach something. So for instance, in the Catholic Church, if you're going to receive communion, so somebody who has been divorced, somebody who has, certain things that they've done that they haven't gone to confession. Technically, they're not supposed to go receive Eucharist. Like, they're not eligible to take in the sacred. That's kind of the thing. So, So what I kind of feel like as I've mentioned before, my view of the world is more what I call tantric, which is, again, people have all kinds of negative associations with that word, but it's really, like I said, it's a word that means weave. It's about taking the ordinary life and the sacred life and saying that they're actually woven together. There's not actually a difference. Like, that's the reality beyond the reality, is that everything that we do is sacred. Everything is part of the same sacred picture. It's not like, oh, that part's okay and that part's not okay. When you're talking about very strict, like, say, Vedic Hinduism, then that would be a thing. When you start getting into some of the tantric deities, like Matangi, for example, Matangi is a deity of pollution. Like, literally, you give in her pujas, then you give her leftovers. Like, you would never give leftovers as an offering to a Hindu deity, but you would to Matangi. Matangi represents all those pollutions, female menstruation, you know, all these things that are regarded in many cultures as a sign of uncleanliness. And so when I see this particular figure in my dream, I'm like, she's like a figure almost of uncleanliness, and she's in this wild space. So it was just really interesting, this kind of, and she's seen as this kind of monstrous feminine. I was talking a lot about this on my other channel. So it was just interesting to me, but it made me consider ideas of purity, because doing the kind of work that I do, a lot of people feel like, oh, well, you probably live a very organic lifestyle, and you're probably a vegan, and you're probably this and that. And I'm like, actually, I'm none of those things, because, you know, I'm a Taurian for one thing. And as such, there's just certain things that I enjoy. Yeah, I'm a meat eater. I'm not like, I'm you know, from a Hindu perspective, I'm actually a very bad Hindu perspective, because it's like, you're not really, you know, supposed to do a lot of these things. But for me, it's more about, no, I'm living in the world, and, you know, I'm going to, I mean, you can talk about whether or not people should be doing things to excess or something like that, but it's not, you know, you can't, what's the word I'm looking for? You can't, we kind of look at, it falls into that mindset that says in order to do spiritual work, you have to be pure. And the problem is ideas of purity end up going well beyond areas where they would make sense. So for instance, keeping yourself clean, hygiene, you know, general basic hygiene, you know, making sure that you're bathed, making sure that the food you eat is not contaminated, making sure that the water you drink is not contaminated with stuff that could make you sick. I mean, that's a very normal way of thinking about purity, right? You want something that doesn't have things in it that could potentially make you ill or be fatal. Okay, that's the sense of purity that we want. You know, like, again, good to go back to COVID, everybody was wearing masks, everything was wiping everything down with disinfectant, because we wanted to make sure that this virus that could be harmful to us didn't get transferred. Okay, and of course it can get transferred anyway, but taking these kind of purification measures to stop that from happening. The problem is a lot of times when this gets transferred to spiritual concepts, when we start talking about, I remember they would talk about in Catholic school, the clean milk bottle of the soul, right? And whether or not you were going to have stains on it from the things that you did. That's where I start to have a problem, because when purity narratives start to come into being value judgments about somebody's lifestyle, you know, whether you're a pure person or whether you're not. And the reality is that nobody's really pure. It creates a problem because it creates this ideal of perfection and this ideal of what something's supposed to be and how a person's supposed to be. So if we go back, okay, if we take the example of a spiritual leader or a guru of some kind, okay, that person is held up to a very, very high standard of purity, which actually, depending, like I'm also particularly, again, thinking about gurus and things in the East, is that standard doesn't, when you're talking about somebody who has reached enlightenment, the concept of purity is sometimes juxtaposed to logic or practicality. Yeah, I mean, and again, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about purity in the sense of just clearing your space or of cleaning something or of just doing what avoids harm, certainly, yes, there's definitely that concept of doing that, because, you know, we don't want to have, you know, or contradicts it. Yeah, well, that's just it too. Like, we don't want, you don't want certain things around your house. Obviously, you don't want like fecal matter around your house. You don't want, like, there's just certain things that it's just like, no, you don't want these things around. But I think where I'm going with this is sort of the idea when we start talking about purity, people start using it, for example, for racial narratives. This is at least part of the difficulty that people have when they start thinking that whiteness is somehow the ultimate state of humanness, which it's not. but people can look at it that way. I have seen people who kind of think of that. There are psychological things on records of people who are very dark-skinned thinking that somehow they're shameful or something, or there's something toxic or cursed about them because it's like, no, that's not what we mean by dark and light. But those narratives can become embedded. And again, while it's definitely very sensible to say, okay, yes, I don't want to eat something that's going to poison me. At the same time, the idea that, I can only eat foods that come from this space and do this. And again, there may be certain groups of people. I know that certainly swamis who are living in they eat foods that have not been ritually treated in a certain way, that they can actually become sick from that because of the type of lifestyle that they live. But but I'm also kind of thinking, I just find it as a general thing. If we're talking about purity versus pollution, when we are, it can become a way of, it can be used as a means of talking about kind of what's superior and what's inferior in places where that concept doesn't belong there. That person's inferior because I think they're dirty. You'll hear things like that. Or that person is, or that somebody, there a whole lot that is set around, things dealing with sexuality, or things dealing with, anything dealing with the earth. It becomes something that's dirty to people, or that's polluted. As one of my astrologer friends pointed out, she had said, yeah, did you notice that every swear word that there is, every word you're not allowed to say, relates either to defecation or to sex? It relates to one of those two things. So it's because we regard all those things as repellent. But the thing is, it kind of gets back to what I'm saying. These are part of the world that we live in. And so I just thought it was really interesting to have this dream about this figure who's coming out of like this muddy kind of water. So, you kind of got this dirty kind of a feel. This monstrous figure who's taking everything that's like, and like just playing with one's, concept of purity. And to me, I almost felt like, yeah, there's this kind of thing of the way in which we may overrate that to some degree. There's when it comes to health, like maybe a good metaphor or analogy here would be the person who has their children, and it's like every little thing. I've known people like this, and even for themselves, where every time they get like the tiniest sniffle, they have to run and get an antibiotic. Every time there's one little thing, I have to scrub it with antibacterial. And it's funny because a lot of these people I find are sick all of the time. Or their kids are, and they're like, I don't understand. I'm so clean. Like, why am I sick all of the time? It's like, well, because the stuff that was helpful, there are helpful bacteria, there are helpful things around. Or just by exposing yourself, this is like the whole thing behind vaccines. If you expose yourself to something, you become immune to it. That's why a lot of the anti-vax stuff, I'm like, well, the problem with that is that it's kind of been shown that if you allow yourself to be infected, that you develop an immunity to it. Okay, so sometimes those impurifications can actually be something that helps you, that helps build your defenses, that actually makes you, in the same way that if like negative things happen to us, it's like, okay, but these also build up our life experience. They build up the people that we are. And to be in the world is to experience it in all of its things, and not, when we spend a lot of time making value judgments about, I can't enjoy the things of the world because this will make me a bad or an impure person. And I don't mean like getting involved in something that's like super debauched or something like that. I don't necessarily mean something like that. But even some things like, I don't know, indulging in like a double chocolate cake. I mean, just even stuff like that. Some people will go, oh no, I really, that would just be so bad. Except it's just one of those things where people won't indulge in anything that they consider sensual because they think that makes them, that's something to be ashamed of. That they've profaned themselves in some way. And it's like this separation, I think, between the two. I'm kind of saying there's not, I mean, yes, there's certain rituals, there's certain contexts. Certainly I'm doing the intuitive development class this weekend. We're going to talk about the way in which one protects oneself from influences that may be harmful to us. Okay. So what's harmful? But it's not, so yeah, we definitely try to avoid things that will harm us, but there's a lot of things that we also push away from ourselves in the name of what's impure, that it's kind of like, okay, now we're kind of actually moving into a territory where purity is not a good thing anymore. You're moving into this space where where we are just judging and ashamed of like every action that we take, or we're very worried about certain actions. That's when you have too much of a concern about purity, you end up living in fear a lot of the time, either living in fear or living in shame when it becomes an overarching thing. Certainly the disorder that people talk about as being obsessive compulsive is connected to, for example, you'll have people who will wash their hands repeatedly over and over again. Okay. And like 100 times, because it's almost like they feel like there's some stain they can't get out. There's and again, I feel while most people are not necessarily that extreme with these kinds of behaviors, we still kind of have this, what we have that's often in shadow for us, what we often have that is hard for us to confront or hard for us to think about, falls into this area of what we might consider to be polluted in some way. And I mean this in a broader sense, not necessarily individual things. But we do, so I don't know, I feel like sometimes these concepts of purity, and again, just like I talk about concepts of ascension or concepts of being above everything. Funny, right? Because life itself is cyclical. Well, yes, exactly. And decay and death and things like all that's part of the cycle. And I think part of it, certainly part of it, especially if you're overzealous about health, is sometimes people are really just trying, it's another reflection of like a fear of death, right? It's another reflection of a fear of change. And, that's, and it's, so that's why I always say like, I'm not a nut about purity. I think I'm thinking about this too in the context of doing Reiki 2 today, because there's a manual that they use, or that Karina has licensed, and one of my objections to it. Ooh, this is interesting this morning. We've got almost all major arcana this morning. One of my objections to it is the idea that one cannot do Reiki unless they're in a purified state. You can't eat heavy foods, you can't have alcohol, you can't have this, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I was like, that's nonsense. Of course you can. How many times I've, had a couple of drinks and then had to come home and do, like, somebody's called me and said, hey, can you send distance Reiki or something? I send it and it works just fine. It has nothing to do with, because that also puts us into it. Like, we have to be these kind of pure, perfected kinds of beings. And this is where we're constantly pushing ourselves to be something that we're not. Okay? This is where we believe we're not allowed to make mistakes. It's where we believe that we have to be a certain kind of person to be good enough. And that's where I have trouble with purity narratives. And so I thought the dream was kind of interesting in what it seems to be pointing out there. I haven't fully analyzed it yet, but it's just, that just came up this morning and I thought that was so interesting. Anyway, I hope what I'm saying about purity makes sense. I'm going to actually just run into our reading, because as I mentioned at the very beginning of the live stream, I do have to leave because I got to get showered and out the door like within an hour, so to get to teach this class all day. So our first card is Beyond Illusion, okay, which is the Judgment card. Interestingly enough, we're talking about judgments, okay, but Beyond Illusion means kind of beyond the kind of categorizations that we make, seeing something in its complete state, seeing something for what it is, okay. We're not in a state where we need to be afraid of certain things, or we need to be, necessarily, afraid of what comes next. You're at a point where you're able to determine. Judgment should really be more about right action, okay, rather than ethics. We have ethics in a society, but sometimes our moral and ethical sensibility comes out of traditions that are probably long dead. I'm thinking particularly like the American puritanical traditions, right? And they're called Puritans, right? The idea, and if you think about the kind of life that those people led, I mean, it's just, it was just like, no smiling, no laughing, no dancing, no doing anything, everything's got to be very serious because, any indulgence in this world is bad. Makes you impure, it's bad. So judgment should not be about these kinds of moralizations. These judgments have to be about, okay, I'm in this situation, and based on what I know, what would be the correct way to respond to this, okay? Our inner feeling of which we're unaware, we have the Lovers card, okay? So the Lovers is about about connection. Again, connection on that, we'll call it the deepest level. I don't necessarily want to say the highest level for reasons that I've just mentioned, but just the idea that we have this kind of connection to people, okay? And our external feeling, of which we're aware, once again, we have the completion card, okay? We know we're in a state, we're beyond illusion. We know that the answer into the future is moving, and we may unconsciously be moving towards this idea of love, towards this love that is more about compassion for people and supporting each other rather than hating, being afraid, and building up walls, right? And we know that that era is coming to an end. Okay, we know that that's coming to an end. And so once again, we have the creator. We were just talking about creativity yesterday, right? So it's almost like it's almost like this is recapping what I was talking about the other day, but not getting stuck. And I think too, with purity, this makes me think that we can also get stuck in this thing of having to do something perfectly or having to do it right the first time, or otherwise we're a failure at it. That's another thing that's kind of tied into that what I'm doing is crap, right? That's just crap. Being the creator means, again, connecting, you're beyond illusion. And like I said, these are all major arcana cards right above it. This is King of Wands energy. This is saying, you're empowered to go forth and act from that space of love, of support. Our outcome card, again, is the awareness card. This is the Chariot, okay, another major arcana. And yeah, seeing the person who you really are. So as we peel away the layers of ourselves, okay, as we start to do that kind of work, I feel like what this is saying is that we have to accept ourselves as we are, like all parts of it, not just the ones that we think are. It's not a matter of, because purify can also have to do with purge. We can say, okay, so I want to be this kind of a person, so I have to get rid of all these things. Getting rid of all those things creates an imbalance. That's part of who you are, and that's part of the dynamic, that's part of the play. So when we talk about purity, I mean, if we're not talking about things that we're doing to preserve, the natural things that we do to preserve life and health, then, when we start getting into the idea that everything around us is filthy, then that's when you have to kind of say, okay, wait a minute, that's why I always kind of say, you want to back off from going too far into that way of thinking, because to a certain extent, one of the things that the more you get involved in certain practices is that everything is good as it is. And I realize for some people with certain things, we say, well, no, that's not good and that's not good. Right. I mean, understood, but it's the game, and there's always going to be the villains, and there's always going to be the players and there's always going to be the thing that's contrary to maybe the way that we feel we would like it to be, right? But there's always going to be this impure factor there, and it's not something that we have to attack with loads of disinfectant, Actually, friend of mine and I were discussing perfect people do not navigate failure well. Yeah, and that kind of goes back to what I had said about the families who have the perfect lives and that have everything that my mother had said. She said those people have not lived life. Joseph Campbell would say, if everything has gone along perfectly from you, from A to B, and of course perfect also means finished, so it's kind of weird. But if it's, at least from the Latin word, but if you move from A to B to C on things and everything has just come to you smoothly, you finished school, you got your degree at the best school, you got a great job, you did this. Joseph Campbell said, if your life is going along like that with no missteps, no failures, no mishaps, he says, then you're probably living someone else's version of your life. You're probably living you're probably following somebody else's narrative. And the question is, I guess you could do that, but the question is that what's really authentic to you? Is that really who you are? In order to figure out who you are, that your missteps can define you as much as your successes. And we learn from, you learn from both. And you don't figure out who you are unless at some point, you're going to do something and you go, oh, gee, in retrospect, that was a mistake. Or, or kind of like what I was talking about. Well, I think it was only one person on at that point, but it was just kind of like the idea of this, like I said, this live stream I watch and people kind of saying, trying to protect a certain individual from not doing a certain thing or covering a certain artist in their videos. And I'm like, well, yeah, but if it's a mistake, and probably it was, but I don't know, maybe it wasn't. They may have a different perspective on it, and then maybe it's something that they can learn from. The fact that we always want to jump in and like save people from stuff and say, no, you shouldn't do this. This isn't the right thing. I mean, we're not talking about children. We're talking about grown-ups here. There's a certain amount of falling down on your face and making a mistake that has to happen in life, generally speaking. So that is kind of being beyond illusion. Being beyond illusion is just recognizing that, we make the judgments in the moment based on the information we have. We don't always make the best ones, okay? Or maybe we do. Maybe we always do. But if you are true to yourself, you're always going to make the best judgment, even if it doesn't appear to be that way to other people. So, but yeah, and exactly, if somebody always thinks that they always has to win, then they don't take losing very well. They become what they would have called in sports like a sore loser. The idea, it's, the sportsman-like thing to do is to say, well, okay, I lost and, good game, like that kind of a thing. But a lot of people, that's to kind of D'Souza's point there. It's just kind of like, people don't always navigate failure well. And that can be a problem. When you think about the kid who, if you have kids who are out playing a game and somebody else wins and somebody starts throwing themselves on the ground, pounding their fists, going, "It's not fair. I won. You didn't win." And what does everybody think about that? It's just like, I'm sorry, you didn't win. But again, a 3-year-old doing it and other people doing it is a whole different matter, right? But anyway, I just want to pull one more card and then I have to get going for today. This is kind of a quickie because I have to get ready for this class. Okay, our oil card for today is renewing. And the key word is forgiveness. The trigger statement is, I did not deserve this. The true statement is, I forgive. Allow the labels of judgment to disappear. See situations and individuals through your heart and forgive yourself. And yeah, actually, that's probably fun. That's actually also a really good observation, because I think a lot of times the person who we tend to think is the most polluted is ourselves, more than even other people. It's we always tend to look at ourselves and say and look at where we're flawed and where we're lacking. And, people who look at themselves in the mirror and go, ugh, this is wrong, that's wrong, oh, that's disgusting, I don't like this, I don't like that. The way we do this to ourselves. And so we end up sort of self-flagellating, and criticizing ourselves to a point. But again, needing to operate from a space of love, not just for others, but it has to be a love of yourself and an acceptance of yourself as you are, as they say, warts and all, So, I don't know. Interesting topic here, but it kind of does bring up the idea to me of only certain people being eligible through purity for certain things. And that to me is a concept that if we're talking about a general life strategy, I'm not going to speak to, specific rituals or specific religious things or whatever. Those rituals may be there for a reason, maybe not at this point, I don't know. But I feel like, that's when we're talking about day-to-day life and we're trying to live a spiritual life. Living a spiritual life does not mean you have to live in this constant state of purity. It literally means, you live how is it put? Living the ordinary life in the non-ordinary way. And that doesn't mean excluding yourself from things because they're, you choose what you're going to participate in and not participate in. You're going to choose how, what path you think is best for you. Okay. But not based on, to do it based on purity is to be stuck in that sense of division. And when you're stuck in that sense of division, that's where you start to get fear about different things. And that makes it harder to kind of be in the present and to just live life, because we're always saying, oh, but I can't have this thing. Oh, but I can't do that thing. And sometimes, again, that's a very general statement. It can vary, but I do feel like that's something that we have to consider. Are we cutting ourselves off too much in favor of what we think is the good and the pure, and not allowing ourselves to experience certain things? Or are we passing judgments where we don't know how to empathize with people in other situations and things as well? And are we trying to purify ourselves to the point that we're making ourselves ill? So anyway, just some thoughts for today. I hope you guys have a what was it? Keep contemplating infallibility as the precursor to failure. I think I missed that one. That one just came up. Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, yes, yeah, because nobody is infallible. That's the bottom line. Doctrine of the Pope notwithstanding, nobody's infallible. So, and that's okay. It makes life interesting. So, okay, so I'm going to get ready for my Reiki class. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm hoping some of you will be joining me tomorrow night for the intuitive development class, for which I'm very excited. Should be a really good one. I have everything put together. I think I have just 1 or 2 more things I want to add. Thanks, this was great. Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad, like I said, I sometimes start on a topic and then I kind of feel like I'm dancing around a little bit. So I'm glad that this was definitely a useful discussion. So I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great Saturday and take care.